My name is Heather Horwedel. I am a young adult with spina bifida. Um, I have been involved with the Spina Bifida Association since the beginning. My parents were um, were part of the group of the parents that were the first ones to start our chapter. I started out as someone receiving services. Um, as a as a started out as a 5-year-old. Grew from there. When I was older, I decided to get more involved and became a volunteer, doing things around the office, like office work. Um, Grew into going to different events, helping out with different panels, and sometimes doing childcare or organizing childcare or events or for events that the Spina Bifida Association was holding. I am a peer advocate. I've done legislative advocacy. I am co-chair for the walk and roll for the Spina Bifida Association of Northeastern New York. So
All right, awesome. So you're, from my understanding, you're planning on speaking a little bit about just some situations that people living with spina bifida face in independent living as an adult, whether it's having to do with medical advocacy, disabilities advocacy, legislative advocacy, that kind of stuff. So I know you said you wanted to open up with a story. Are you still planning on doing that?
yes. First, I wanted to go over kind of what advocacy is. Advocacy is about helping you speak up for yourself or your community, to make sure that your views, opinions and needs of you or your community are heard, understood, and met. So I've done a few different types of advocacy. I have done, well, it's been about a year and a half, almost 2 years now, that I have lived on my own, in my own apartment. And getting here has been an interesting struggle. And I've had a lot of help from the Spina Bifida Association because I was not sure where to start. When I was 18, I had services from OPWDD, or up until I was 18, I had those services. And then when I turned 18, I lost those services and had to go through a process to try and get those services back. Ultimately, I went through the process 3 separate times and was denied all 3 times, because it was determined that I was no longer eligible due to different factors, such as I didn't meet the criteria for different tests that were given. So I had to figure out a different way to do things, because now some of the services that were available through OPWDD were no longer available to me. So I went through, with a lot of help from the Spina Bifida Association, I was able to get set up with Section 8. And it took quite a while to go back and forth trying to find an apartment that was accessible and still stayed in the criteria for Section 8. And I was able to find one, and with the help of my family and the association, I moved in, and was able to also get set up with aid services through consumer directed choices. And this was all within the last 4 years. These accommodations were made, and I've been able to work on sorry, hold on a sec. I've been able to live independently for the past year and a half. I have an aide that comes and works with me for a few hours a day during the week, and she helps me with things around the house. And also about a year ago, I had to advocate for, I was having some health issues, and it started around the same time that I had moved. So when I had moved, I was going back and forth for different doctor's appointments because they weren't sure what was going on. They gave me multiple different things that it could be, but every time I went and got that checked out, those things that they thought it was, it ended up not being. And I kept going back and saying, should we check this? Should we check the shunt? They ended up eventually, after about 6 months, checking the shunt and finding out that it was. So going back and forth for about 6 months was tough, but that's something with advocacy. It's not going to be an overnight thing. You have to be persistent.
Right. Yeah, speaking on that, if you don't mind me asking, you did say that it was kind of like being able to find accessible housing that also aligned with being Section 8 housing. Was there also difficulty with maintaining distance near your healthcare providers, or what are some of the other compounding factors that you had to look at when you were looking into that housing?
For me, I had to make sure, because I also don't currently drive, so I had to make sure that it was within the limits of the Star bus. I had to make sure that it was in the limits financially that Section 8 was going to give me. I had to make sure, like you said, that I could get to and from doctor's appointments when I needed to. And also that it was in an area that I could get to and from work. I have a background in childcare, so I needed to make sure that I was going to be able to get to and from work. I had to make sure that in the apartment it was going to be big enough for me to be able to get through doorways, get my chair in and out of the rooms with the furniture that would be in the rooms. And then make sure that like I could do things, because in my, like, for example, in my kitchen, it's a typically set up kitchen except for the sink is lower. And the cabinets, there are cabinets like above the sink and below. I can't use the ones above the sink because it's too high for me to reach. So instead of putting my stuff that I use on a daily basis up there, my aide and I and my parents figured out that I could put stuff that I don't use all of the time up there. And then like plates and cups and silverware, and even some of my food I would put underneath. So that kind of thing. So it's just been about trying to adjust and make sure that I have all of my needs met.
Right.
And also working with the maintenance department here at my apartment complex, because before I moved in, I even said that I had noticed in the cabinets that are underneath, I could only reach like the first quarter of the cabinets, then the back half I wouldn't be able to get to. So, and I had mentioned that to one of the maintenance people, and they were able to install the sliding shelves into the cabinets underneath. So now there's 2 levels that I can get to. And I can just pull the drawers out so that I can use the entire cabinet.
Wow, cool. So that in and of itself is advocacy, right? What you're saying is here's my need. How can that need be met?
Yep, I had to call maintenance and say this is, or I didn't necessarily call them, but while I was meeting with them, I said, this is something that I can see already that is going to be a challenge for me. What can we do to fix this? And it's about being able to work together. It doesn't always have to be, and it shouldn't always be some sort of confrontation, or at least a negative confrontation. You can talk, like they were really helpful with coming in and saying, okay, we'll put this in. But also can't expect people to know what your needs are. Because a lot of times, like somebody who isn't in a wheelchair or doesn't have the needs that I do, they don't think about it because that's not part of their daily life.
Right.
So just bringing stuff like that up to somebody else's attention, they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll figure this out.
Yeah. I like what you said, that it doesn't have to be, advocacy doesn't have to be a negative confrontation, but it is still a confrontation because you're essentially, right, asking for something. And a lot of people can be uncomfortable with confrontation just in general. So what are some strategies that you're able to implement when you think about that kind of thing? When now obviously advocacy is a big part of your life, like you've made it your job to some degree. And so how can you put into words, can you put into words what it means to like have that strategy to approach that kind of confrontation in a productive way?
Well, it's not it for me, it's definitely not something that has ever been easy for me to learn. It takes a lot of practice, and it's about recognizing your needs and realizing that it's a learning process for everyone. Because being able to speak up for yourself isn't always easy, but it is necessary to do to be able to function. And then to make sure that someone else knows what you need, they're learning too. So just being able to communicate what your needs are, and giving suggestions for both ways, and being able to listen to other people's suggestions and being like, okay, we can compromise on certain things. Or maybe like like not necessarily compromising, but if somebody brings up another suggestion, maybe trying it out and seeing if it works for you before you automatically say no. Or making sure that they're willing to do the same. And just a lot of practice, or something like, I recently was out at a park and I went into a public bathroom, and the bathroom itself was great. It was accessible. The handicap stall was huge. It had the bars in the right place for me to be able to transfer when I needed to. But then when I went to wash my hands, the soap dispenser was way up over my head and I could not reach. And I looked at my friend and was like, the only way I'm going to be able to reach this is if I sit on the counter. So that's not a good idea. But then I was able to go and talk to someone who works at the park, and it's also about being able to find the right people to talk to. I was able to talk to one of the directors, and I mentioned, this is an issue. Like, the bathroom is great. The only issue that I'm having is I can't wash my hands. And she let me know that they'll see what they can do to fix it. And then later that day, I got an email from them with a picture, and they had fixed it. They had moved the soap dispenser down to a lower location. So not only could I use it, other people could use it, like small children could use it without having to ask their parents. And that's another thing that I've noticed is if, like, the way you approach it, and if you say, like, for me, it wasn't just about, this wasn't just going to benefit me. And if it's in a public situation like that, if it's not going to just benefit you and going to benefit a bigger population, it's more than likely going to get done faster or be received better than just saying, I can't do this. Is there a way to fix it? That kind of thing.
Wow, that's so cool that they were willing to do something the same day that you brought it to their attention.
Mm-hmm. It was awesome. And then there was another time where a similar situation where I was at the gym, and there were certain equipment that I couldn't use or certain things that I couldn't do. One of them was getting out of my chair to stretch. Because for me, Florida chair transfers are not something that I'm comfortable doing by myself. And all of the stretching mats were on the floor. So I went to the some of the people that worked there, and I brought it up. I was like, I can't, for me to be able to safely work out, I need to be able to stretch. And some of the workout routines that I was doing would be easier to do if I was on a mat. Is there any way that we could get something, like some sort of a table that we could put the mats on? And then I also pointed out that it wouldn't just benefit me. There were people there that were recovering from things like knee surgery. They had a class for people with Parkinson's disease, where their balance wasn't the greatest, so they couldn't get on and off the floor easily. Other people who can't get on and off the floor easily, and they could all benefit from higher tables. And so they worked with me, and I showed them different things that I've used in the past for things like physical therapy, where they have those tables with the mats on them. And within the next couple of weeks, they had built a table that we could put a mat on.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. They were really great and really helpful with that.
So how long did it take you to start incorporating advocacy into like your everyday life activities? Because I feel like there's a good there when you're at the Spina Bifida Association or when you're promoting an event for the Spina Bifida Association, that's a time and a place where you know that advocacy is required. But how did you make that transition from, okay, this is what I do here with the people that I care about in the community that I'm a part of, to, oh, wait, I need to do this in my everyday life too?
Well, like you said, that is actually how I started with advocating for the Spina Bifida Association and going to different legislative events or going to different events and talking about the Spina Bifida Association and what they've done and what they need. And I had been doing that since I was younger. I think I started as a teenager doing that. And then I did different things, just trying to figure out what works for me. Like saying, like in school, I did a lot of sports, but I didn't do any of them through school because there was a lot of pushback with that from the school. So I told my parents I still wanted to do stuff, and they were able to help me get into different activities to be able to do sports. So it's as simple as well, it's not really necessarily simple, but it's smaller steps, like going to somebody you trust and saying, I want to do this, but I'm not sure how. So being able to build yourself a support system or figuring out who you can talk to that is going to be able to help you do different things.
Yeah, definitely. So transitioning a little bit, since you brought up school, do you have anything sort of on education advocacy as an adult with spina bifida, or maybe even the balance between education and vocational advocacy?
Yeah, sure. I started with like advocating for my education actually in, I can't remember whether it was middle school or high school. I think it was high school. But the school wanted to put me in a special education gym class. And I really didn't want to. I was like, I can modify what the class that I'm already in is doing. So why move me to a special education class when I don't necessarily need that much help? And we went back and forth with different meetings with the school and ultimately decided, all right, I will try it. I will give it a try. Like I said, compromising, I'll give it a try. I went to the first gym class, and the activity they were doing that day, and the class was, it was all students with special needs. I was the only one in a wheelchair. And the activity that they were doing was volleyball, but they were using a balloon instead of a volleyball. because it was safer for them. Not safer for me because I am allergic to them. So then I pointed this out to them, and the class that I was originally in was on the other side of the gym, and they let me go back to that class. So it was kind of just trying out different things and proving that, you know, that I know that this is what's going to work. And then going to, like, as far as college goes, going to the special education department before you go in, like before school starts, and talking to one of the counselors there and making sure you have your accommodations, because high school and college are very different. College, it's very much more on you to keep track of. If you have something like extended time on tests, it's up to you to go to your professors and then go to the testing center to set up your appointments. Or to make sure that you get the help you need from your counselors. Or your professors. But knowing that your professors and your counselors are there to help you.
Right. So you assume a lot of personal responsibility sort of when you go into those bigger systems, when you're pursuing things at higher levels, then it's really in your own hands, right, to make sure that your voice is being heard. And that's at the root of advocacy. I do want to share real quick, Lisa messaged me and said that back in the 70s and 80s, there was no option for a gym class for people with spina bifida in public school. So it's clear that even though there are still a lot of things that need to be addressed, we're coming a long way and just trying to be more inclusive of that, I guess.
Yes. Well, but I'm glad you are staying active now, though, with all of the things that you do.
Yeah. Lots of Zumba on Lisa's part.
Yes. And then, let's see, any other school. So, and that, for me, as far as school goes, going to those meetings, when I was in middle school and high school, my parents gave me the option of going to my IEP meetings or not. My parents and the school, because it was optional for me, because they could have taken over and said, this is what's been going on, this is what our plans are, but I chose to be more involved, and go to those meetings too, which I think helped me be able to say, get more of the help that I needed in college. Or at least make or attempt to. And like I said, it's about education for everyone. Because another situation that I ran into in college was where they asked me to try out, or help them figure out an evacuation plan. Because when I went into the college, they didn't have one. And most of my classes were on the 3rd floor.
Wow.
Or they didn't have one that they had tested out. I don't know if they actually didn't have one, but they didn't have one that they had tested out. So I had gone in and tested, they had gotten a an evacuation chair. So we went through different meetings to figure out what chairs worked and what chairs didn't for different things. And I had to remember, like, I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for someone who may be higher functioning or lower functioning or just differently functioning than me, but still needs assistance up and down those stairs.
Right.
And pointing out different things that maybe the administration didn't think of, because all they knew was we need a plan, and maybe they're just thinking of someone who uses crutches and needs minimal assistance down the stairs. So I'm pointing out different things like, okay, these transfers work for this, so this chair isn't going to work for someone who is a quadriplegic, because this chair is too low to transfer, or you need two people for this type of transfer, or kind of thing. And in that situation, I didn't just give them, I gave them those suggestions, but I also went to, at the time I was doing physical therapy, I went to my personal physical therapist and said, this is what they had asked me to do. Do you have any suggestions? Or do you have any resources? So she had printed out a list of resources, and had even suggested going to the local fire department if they wanted to do something like learn about transfers or learn how to do transfers, if they weren't going to have the fire department be the one doing them. So it's about finding the right, it's not necessarily about advocate, it is advocating for yourself, but being able to find the right people to help you.
Yeah. Wow. And also, I like that you're saying, you know, you're aware of how far this can go. When you're advocating, right, it's because a problem is directly affecting, I mean, when you're advocating in your everyday life, this problem is directly affecting you. But like you're saying, that the implications go far beyond just you. And that's really cool to think about, is that being in this spot where, you know, advocacy and sometimes can be really frustrating, because it's like, I want to see the fruits of my labor. And you have really great stories about immediate changes that do happen. And we know there's lots of other stories about change that you feel like you're never going to see happen, especially when it comes to policy and legislation and everything. But it is great to understand that there's so much power in it, that you can see the ripple effects from a soap dispenser in the park to, you know, who's going to be impacted by an evacuation plan that you get to help put together. And that's why, you know, I think advocacy is so important. And that's why we're talking about it tonight, is because it's really, really powerful. And to be able to see you kind of do that in so many different scenarios and be connected with people who are then becoming more aware, right? All of the staff, all of the faculty in that institution now are going to be aware of, like, oh, this is something we can't overlook anymore. It's really empowering.
Yep. And like you said, there are some cases where it is an immediate change, but then there are others where you have to be patient, because it is going to take time, and you might have to educate this person, but then also educate multiple other people, and do it multiple times. Like, I've done the legislative advocacy with the Spina Bifida Association, and I've done it since I was 16. And then at least for the last 5 years, we've been doing it for to try to get different things. And this year, these last couple of years were the first that we were able to achieve being put into the budget, which was awesome to see.
Wow. I have one more story that's come in from Lisa, that she said that she was in 10th grade at a school that had 3 levels. And since she was not allowed to use the elevator during a fire drill, she was directed to go to the library at the end of the hall if she was on the 3rd floor, or the principal's office if she was on the 2nd floor, and wait for further instructions. Which, if you're thinking about the fact that that's an emergency drill, what are you going to tell somebody when it's an actual emergency? That seems so crazy to me.
Right. That doesn't, yeah. Sometimes logic doesn't really make sense. And that's another situation, especially when safety is involved, that you need to make sure that you at least try to make people see that this isn't going to work. We need to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a better plan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, right. So I want to take the next few minutes and kind of wrap up in the next 5 to 7 minutes before we head into more of a discussion with everyone who's attending here, to touch on a little bit of legislative action and policy advocacy in sort of that realm of things.
Okay. Is there anything specific you wanted?
Sure. And remember, you can all be typing questions to me directly, or if you don't mind them being in the recording, you can type in the chat box. Mostly, what has been one of the most effective ways for you to advocate for changes in policies? And what has been one of the biggest disparities in legislation regarding disabilities today? Those are 2 of my questions that I don't know if you can speak to or expand on.
Well, I think being consistent helps, because like I said, we've gone back and forth with the same thing for at least 5 years now. And just getting your stories out there and making it personal, letting people know, like, yes, these are the systems and this is how you as a legislator planned for this system to work, but this is actually what is happening, and letting them know your stories.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to practice that. And because for me, legislative advocacy and public speaking is one of the scariest things, at least for me, to do. So it took a long time for me to be able to go there. Like, for the first couple of years that I did it, I went there and I pretty much sat there unless somebody asked me a question, but just going and being there and saying, this organization has helped me, or this system is not helping me, and being a person that is there lets them know that, okay, this is something that needs to change. And then as you get more comfortable and are able to speak more, and tell them your stories, don't be afraid to say, hey, this is what I went through with, like me, with the losing OPWDD. It's not necessarily something that should have happened, but it did, and it's a matter of figuring out how to change the policy or change the requirements to meet people's needs. Or letting them know, hey, this organization didn't help me, or wasn't able to help me in the way that I needed, but I was able to get help from this organization. In my case, that was the Spina Bifida Association.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the biggest issues would probably be like, I guess that, like, the legislators, they do see so many issues and they do deal with so many different organizations and different policies on different levels, that they just don't know what's actually going on, at least not to the extent that we do, because we're going through the systems, we're having to go through applying for different services, which if you've gone through them, you know they're not easy to navigate. And just figuring out, like, okay, what can you do to help, and making them aware that, yes, this is what the system looks like on paper, but in reality, this is what is happening.
Nicely put. Very nicely put. It really becomes, advocacy becomes a very personal endeavor, I think. Like what you're saying, it's sharing your story. You know, one of the things we've been doing with Awareness Month has been the picture frame with the word to change the narrative of people with disabilities. You know, I am a person, I am a human. So therefore, I have a story to tell. And because of that, like that, again, it brings it back just how powerful advocacy can be. And I think, yeah, going back to right to the basics, you know, what you would tell somebody who doesn't necessarily know where to start, right? It's find the right people. And I think living, you know, we're in Albany in the capital region. And so we're able to see kind of those advocacy days, the really big state capital advocacy day. But it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of vulnerability. So, yeah, it can also be, do you find that it can be exhausting at times?
Yes. Like, it does get exhausting, and I don't know, every time like I've said, I've done the legislative advocacy for multiple years. Every time I go, I still get nervous, and I don't know whether it's the public speaking or what, but it still makes me nervous. But being able to push through and tell your stories, not only it helps them learn, but also it'll help you grow and develop those skills for advocacy.